Esteemed Reverend Monsignor Torres, Father Paul Alvarez Norton, Father Marian, my colleagues who have assisted so much at this event, especially Mr. Michael Santarmand, Ms. Salwa Bashar, Mrs. Donna Sullivan, Mrs. Lynn Miller, Mrs. Christina Frantino, and then all our friends, old and new, who are here today. I welcome you. Thank you for coming for our second biannual event, Windows into the Counter-Revolution. Today I will speak about Our Lady of Good Success, and it's something that most of you have heard me talk about, so I will start with some facts that most of you may know. But I hope I end with some thoughts and considerations that will get you thinking and understanding better what Our Lady wants for the people and times in this era. And I hope it will also give you much more hope by understanding better the crisis that has caused such devastation in lives. More than 400 years ago, 300 years before Fatima, Our Lady gave a warning about a terrible crisis in the church and society. At the end of the 16th century, she appeared to a nun in Quito, Ecuador, Mother Mariana T. Torres, and she asked this sister to become a victim for our times. I never tire of telling the story of Mother Mariana de Jesus Torres and the marvelous statue of Our Lady of Good Success, how it was made, the many prophecies, how they pertain, how they were all fulfilled. But since my time is very short here, I'm going to make just a quick review of some of those facts pertinent to our events today, with the hope of increasing your devotion to Our Lady and your trust in her for the future. In 1566, at age 13, she was only 13 years old, Mother Mariana left Spain, she left her family, and she went with her aunt and 5 founding mothers to come to the New World to found the first Conceptionist order in the New World, under the direct order of King Philip II, who was the cousin of her aunt. A terrible storm at sea arose, and it seemed as if the ship would sink. Mother Mariana, age 13, alone saw the cause of that crisis. She saw a 7-headed serpent on the waters, and that serpent shouted out that he would sink the ship because he would not allow this foundation to be made, precisely because of the role it would play in the future. Then Our Lady appeared on the scene, carrying the Christ child and holding a cross, and at the end of the cross was a lance. And directed by the hand of Christ, she slew the 7-headed serpent, and the waters became calm. This episode was considered so significant to the Quito convent that the sisters had made a special badge, which all the sisters in Ecuador wear in the Conceptionist convent, as you can see on the picture of Mother Mariana. There are many symbolic aspects of this storm at sea that I believe we can apply to our times. Today, the church is attacked by a devil determined to sink the bark of Peter. We can also expect a timely intervention of Our Lady at the very moment when the ship seems to be sinking. For Our Lady at Quito promised her assistance at the very moment when all would seem lost. The 3 deaths of Mother Mariana and her 2 resurrections by God seems one made for 2 reasons. One, to purify her soul, but the second, so that she could be allowed to fulfill her mission. A mission first to save her convent, because her life was necessary for its establishment. And next, and maybe more important, to suffer as a victim soul for our times. Much could be said about also the suffering of Mother Mariana in the convent. Why? Because rebellious sisters, even then, were demanding a relaxation of the rule. One of those sisters replaced her as abbess. She was put in the prison convent 4 times. I believe that we find another parallel in our times to this persecution she suffered inside the convent then. Because this persecution inside the convent seems to prefigure what faithful Catholics inside the church are suffering today. There are many prophecies that have been fulfilled. The martyrdom of a truly Catholic president of Ecuador who would come in the middle of the 19th century. That was Gabriel Garcia Moreno, who was assassinated in the public plaza exactly where she said it would happen, exactly how she said it would happen. In 1873. He was assassinated on the order of the Masons after he carried the cross in the Holy Week ceremonies in Quito. There's the proclamations of the dogmas of the Immaculate Conception and of the Assumption of Our Lady, both made at exactly the same time she said they would be made. There are so many prophecies. There's a whole book of them written by the postulator for her cause, Monsignor Luis Cadena y Almeida. And they have all been fulfilled to the crossing of the last T and the dotting of the last I. I have a CD available, Prophecies Fulfilled, where I translated many of those prophecies that have been made. And you'll be surprised how every single point happens exactly as she says. There's one prophecy left, the prophecy of her final conquest. And that itself gives a lot of hope, because we see that every prophecy is fulfilled. There's so much to say, but since my time is limited, I will restrict myself to emphasize the connection of the prophecies of Our Lady Good Success to the collection on Vatican II, published by Atila Guimarães, and our work at TIA, which is to expose, denounce, and fight that infiltration of progressivism in the church, even to the highest pinnacles. Toward that end, I will look at several significant incidences. One is the first death of Mother Mariana in 1582. Mother Mariana was 19 years old, and she was praying in the upper choir. And in that upper choir, you can look down and you see the altar, and there's the altar with the tabernacle. She was praying, looking at the tabernacle at the altar, and suddenly she saw the tabernacle door open, and Christ emerged, suffering as he did at Calvary, with Our Lady at his feet, weeping tears of pearls. Mother Mariana's first reaction: "My Lady, am I to blame for this sadness?" Mother, Our Lady answered, "No, not you, but the criminal world of the 20th century." Then, as our Lord began his agony, she heard the voice of the Eternal Father saying, "This punishment will be for the 20th century." And she saw 3 swords over the head of Christ. On one, the words, "I will punish heresy." On the second, "I will punish blasphemy." On the third, "I will punish impurity." There we have it, those 3 things: heresy, blasphemy, impurity. The 3 things that have invaded and swept through the church with impunity since Vatican Council II. These are the very things that Attila describes and documents in his collection on Vatican II. Seeing these 3 swords over the head of Christ, Mother Mariana was given to understand then all the things that would take place in the church and society in our era. And Our Lady asked her, "My daughter, will you sacrifice yourself for the people of this era?" She replied, "I am willing." And immediately the 3 swords left the head of Christ, descended, and plunged into the heart of Mother Mariana, and she fell dead from the pain. Standing before the judgment seat of God, she was judged blameless, and that she was given the choice to remain in heaven or to return to earth to suffer. Her first desire was to remain in heaven, and then Our Lady intervened, and asked her to suffer as an expiatory victim for the sins of the 20th century, to return to earth. In fact, Mother Mariana did indeed die in 1582, a fact that the convent archives records, with the testimony of the doctor who gave witness to her death. her remarkable resurrection was also recorded. I believe this first death has a special significance as the great miracle worked to show that everything is possible to God. In order for Mother Mariana to fulfill her mission, God resurrected this nun. This marvel from the past can help us to speculate on the great signs from heaven that will come in our times to convert mankind, and give us the faith and courage we need to endure the chastisement and to build the reign of Mary. The second point I would like to emphasize is that Mother Mariana predicted not only the particulars of the crisis in the church to come, but also with great precision its cause and its exact timing. She pinpointed a first crisis, which was that of modernism, which would break out at the end of the 19th century. Any of you with a little knowledge of Catholic history know that is exactly what happened. We had the great outbreak of modernism that threatened to sink the bark of Peter, and we had a saint, Pope Pius X, who God raised up to prevent that. Then she predicted a second and greater crisis, and she foretold that it would explode a little after the middle of the 20th century, the exact time of Vatican II, which opened in October 1962. What did Our Lady show Mother Mariana? Really, there are two aspects, one pertaining to the crisis in the church, one pertaining to the crisis in society. What did she foretell in the church? On January 20th, 1610, a year before the statue was made and completed, she made a great number of these prophecies. She foretold a great apostasy in the clergy, who would become worldly, a great impurity would enter the ranks, and in monasteries and convents, which would leave off their rules. This is the adaptation of the church to the modern world preached by Vatican II, that again we see documented in the books of Attila. As a consequence, she said, vocations would perish. And those religious who remained, she said, straying from the divine compass, will leave the good course to the loss of their souls. How the church will suffer then from the lack of a prelate and a father to watch over her with paternal love, gentleness, strength, discernment, and prudence. You can see she predicted the loss of guidance even from the See of Peter, as we have seen with all the conciliar and post-conciliar popes. She said heresies, blasphemies, and sacrileges would abound, so that there would be an almost extinguishing of the light of faith in souls. The sacraments would be abused and set aside. And then, as you can read in my little book, Our Lady of Good Success, Prophecies for Our Times, she went through each one of the sacraments and described what would happen, showing the changes and abuses. And you will see that it is exact blueprint of what has happened to each sacrament in the Novus Ordo Church. What about Catholic society? It is very interesting for us to contemplate this part of the prophecies, which is often disregarded. And we should take this warning seriously also. One of the results of the decay of faith, the decay of the Catholic spirit, which would almost extinguish the light, precious light of faith in souls. One of its results would be, quote, an almost total and general corruption of customs. The filthy waters of a flood of impurity would inundate the streets of the cities. And we see this in every city across the world today, causing a corruption so complete that, quote, the innocence of children would be almost completely destroyed, modesty would almost no longer be found in women, and there would be almost no virgin souls. Without virginity, she said, it would be necessary for a fire from heaven to fall down on these lands in order to purify them. Here perhaps we have a hint of the chastisement. a purifying and punishing fire that falls from heaven. This is the reason TIA continuously emphasizes the need to return to the ways of being and the customs of those pre-hippie days of the 1960s. And yes, even that false utopia some Catholics make of the earlier 1900s, when liberalism had already infected some key points in culture, preparing the way for the hippie revolution. It is not because we are obsessed with etiquette, formality, and ceremony. No, it is because we take Our Lady's words seriously and know that these good customs, etiquette, ceremonies were the healthful fruit of Christian civilization, a legacy to keep and treasure, not abandon for the modern casual and vulgar ways. We realize it is not enough to restore the Latin Mass to have a Christian civilization, to have the reign of Christ in society, that society of souls that Attila was talking about. There's a need to restore the good Catholic customs, the serene, disciplined life in the family and home, the refined and considerate way of treating each other. It's not enough to restore a hierarchical church. Society begins with its basic cell, which is the family. Family must also have a hierarchy. That must be restored as well. Thus, we must fight in ourselves that egalitarian revolt that Lucifer puts in souls. We see the results of that egalitarianism in relationships between husbands and wives, between children and parents, between students and teachers, and even employees and superiors. Everyone is shouting the non serviam, I will not serve, of Lucifer. The first revolutionary, as Saul Alinsky called him in his handbook for radicals. He dedicated that book to Lucifer, the first revolutionary. For me, it is compelling that Our Lady warns us of this important consequence of the crisis in the church. And it is an invitation for us to take everything we do in our lives more seriously, to be more aware of our dignity as Catholics, the heirs to the kingdom of Christ who won it for us by his passion and his death on the cross. This call for a return to Catholic civility is not just a whim or a fancy. It is a necessity and a demand if we will build the reign of Mary. This is why I and my good friend Judith Mead Fife, who is in the audience somewhere today, we've written a series of books and CDs on Catholic customs, manners, and the family, and we hope to offer more in the future. Those books are available at our bookstand today. These prophecies and much of the life of Mother Mariana were hidden for 300 years, exactly as she foretold. And this devotion was known only in Ecuador, and then not very widely known even then outside the Conceptionist circles. Our Lady of Good Success and the prophecies only came to light at the end of the 20th century, as Mother Mariana predicted they would, because they would be, quote, the remedy for these days. Here we find a great hope and consolation. In that same apparition of 1610, Our Lady told Mother Mariana to have a statue made, exactly as she appeared to her. And you can see in the, she even gave her measurements, exact measurements, 5'9", and a rope stretched miraculously when the Christ child held one end and Mother Mariana the other to give the exact size. And that miraculous episode is preserved in a painting in the convent in Quito, which you can see if you go there. This statue must be made, Our Lady told Mother Mariana, so her faithful daughters of the convent could turn to her as abbess and mother for the trials they would face. For this convent, she told her, would last till the end of the world. And also, so that the faithful souls of the 20th century could have recourse to her in their bitter trials and sufferings. Our Lord himself told Mother Mariana that, quote, in that period, hell will be unleashed and many souls would be lost. Then, the invocation of good success would be, quote, the sustenance and safeguard of the faith in the almost total corruption of the 20th century. She also promised her special assistance to those who would help to spread this devotion. She promised this, and she is one to keep her promises. This is what many people are finding out. They pray to her. She answers and showers her graces, answering requests, but most of all, giving a peace of heart, which comes as we begin to understand what is the cause of this crisis. Further, we know that at a certain moment, Our Lady will intervene and enthrone the proud Satan who wreaks such havoc in the church and society. In the apparition of February 2nd, 1634, which was a year before her death, Mother Mariana was again praying in the upper choir when she looked down on the altar and she saw the sanctuary light extinguish itself. This was one of the most significant of all the prophecies. And then Our Lady gave 5 meanings for the light going out. I will only give you the first here. You can read the rest again in that little book. They're very interesting because it's so on point. The first, she said, signified the propagation of heresies at the end of the 19th and 20th centuries, which would extinguish the precious light of faith in souls. She told Mother Mariana that then the faith and confidence of the faithful, whose number would be small, would be tested. And there would be an occasion when all would seem lost and paralyzed. This will be then the happy beginning of the complete restoration. I stress the words, all would seem lost and paralyzed, because it certainly seems we are walking into those days now. I also emphasize the words complete restoration, not a partial restoration, but a complete one. This triumph is what awaits those who will live to see it. Mother Mariana saw a dark cloud descending over the land, a terrible night, and a chastisement. And Our Lady explained to her, that night will be most horrible, for humanly speaking, evil will seem to triumph. This then will mark the arrival of my hour, when I, in a marvelous way, will dethrone the proud and accursed Satan, trampling him under my feet and fettering him in the eternal abyss. In the end, that darkness will lift, the dawn will come. Clearly, by an unexpected and powerful and marvelous intervention of Our Lady, who will play a major role in raising the dawn of her reign, the reign of Jesus through Mary, foretold by another great prophet of the 18th century, St. Louis Grignon de Montfort. On January 20th of this year, the feast of Our Lady of the Miracle, to whom the collection is dedicated, I was reading a commentary by Dr. Plinio on the Saints of the Day, which we post on our website, which is a very popular page. He spoke of the great miracle of an infused faith that the Jew Alphonse Ratisbon received from Our Lady of the Miracle when she appeared to him while he was standing before an altar of St. Michael the Archangel in Santa Andrea della Frata, which is a church in Rome. This picture was made to commemorate that appearance and that great conversion, which shook all of Europe. The Ratisbons were like the Rothschilds. And for a Ratisbon to convert and become a Jesuit priest was really the beginning of the knowing of Our Lady of the Miraculous Medal, because it was through his wearing of a miraculous medal that miracle occurred. He then goes on, Dr. Plinio went on after that, to speculate about our days, the coming chastisement, and the intervention of Our Lady predicted at Quito and at Fatima. What kind of intervention will it be, he wondered. What could be the miracle that could move modern man to return to the Catholic faith? Contemporary man has reached such a hardness of heart that he is no longer touched by miracles like the one that took place with Ratisbon, nor the series of miracles at Lourdes that took place 15 years later. He speculates that 2 miracles are necessary. The first, we need a miracle that will move good Catholics to be unafraid to disagree with the prevailing opinion of the revolutionary milieu around them. They should become indifferent to that opinion that stifles a healthful resistance to error and heresy. And further, they should take the offensive against it. Here, by way of example, I mention the conversations with Atila on this collection of Vatican II that Mrs. Donna Sullivan, where is she? Where is she? Oh, right back there. Right there. That she hosts. These conversations are to open people to start to talk about the problems of Vatican II. How many persons do not want to become involved out of fear of human respect? I'm afraid of what so-and-so will think if they realize my position is so strong, that I'm against Vatican II, that I question the popes. Or a kind of fatalist attitude. Why bother? Things are already so bad it won't make any difference. We should bother. We're called to bother, to take stands, to be certain of the victory and hold high the banner so that others can see it and follow it. This is the only way the battle will be won, with each one of us playing our part of intransigence, of intolerance for error that Attila was talking about. As for the other objection, the question of human respect, not wanting to look too radical to my friends, we need to conquer human respect and become the counter-revolutionaries, the apostles of the latter day that St. Louis de Montfort spoke about. When this fear lifts, I believe that many miracles will come. A recent observation of Attila's made a very strong impact on me. He said he had the impression that the reason the chastisement that precedes the victory does not come is not because God is waiting for the bad to get worse. He said this on the day that we learned that Paul VI was going to be made a saint. He said, "How can it get worse?" No, it's not because we're waiting for things to get worse, God is to send the punishment. What could be worse than a pope denying the missionary mark of the church, as Francis did, saying at Abu Dhabi that God willed diversity of religions? What could be worse than the homosexual and pedophilia crimes that continue unabated in the church? Recently, Michael Santarman noted at our lunch table that he was rereading Homosexuality, Pedophilia, and Vatican II by Attila. And in it, he lists year by year up till the year 2004, I think, when we published it, all the crimes, pedophilia and homosexual crimes that were being committed inside the church. And Michael Santarman said, I just suddenly realized that that list could go on. It didn't stop. That list of abuses has not ended. It could continue right until the present day. I mention only one that is a real scorcher. Just a month ago, on February 2nd of this year, the very feast day of Our Lady of Good Success, there was a huge scandal in Quito. A scandal that all the papers reported. A Franciscan called Fray Bustos said a mass. He was chosen by the bishop to say that mass in the Conceptionist convent in Quito. Later that same day, he was caught molesting two girls aged 10 and 14 at a catechism class. The parents caught the priest. They beat him like any good Spaniard would and bashed in his face, as the papers reported. And then they put him in jail where he's waiting, and at first there was not even a lawyer willing to represent him. By the way, Fray Bustos is a close confidant of Quito's Archbishop, Fausto Torres. There are also rumors, and this is what the papers are reporting, that the Archbishop himself will retire early because of other reputed scandals that have taken place in his palace. If he retires early, I imagine and I expect we will find that a good post is made for him at the Vatican, where he will retire happily. Yes, evil has reached a zenith of power, even with open Satanism on the rise, which once, I would say 20 years ago, would be unimaginable. No, it is not evil that needs to increase for the chastisement to come, Atila suggested, but rather Our Lady is waiting for the good to be stronger, for that fear and human respect that keeps a true resistance from rising needs to lift and be replaced by an intransigent intolerance for error that is necessary for the victory. In that mentioned commentary on Our Lady of the Miracle, Dr. Plinio noted that he thought something like this is the first miracle that is needed. And he imagines there could be something like the lifting of the fear and human respect that occurred on the Pentecost as the apostles were quaking in the cenacle. Tongues of fire appeared over the apostles, and they left the cenacle with the courage to face everything. Before this, they were cowards, but with this, they became invincible fighters. The whole city of Jerusalem heard an enormous exploding sound that came from the cenacle. Therefore, it seems it was not just an interior action within their souls that took place, but something preceded or followed by a great exterior miracle. We should ask Our Lady to give us a similar miracle to transform us into those apostles of the latter times predicted by St. Louis Grignon de Montfort in true devotion to Mary and in his extraordinary fire prayer. Then the second miracle. Based on the prophecies of both Fatima and Quito, both church-approved apparitions, the divine intervention should be a chastisement. That's not the miracle. The chastisement is our due. It's what we will receive for not converting, for not consecrating Russia and the world to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. This chastisement would punish the world for its acceptance of the revolution and especially for the sins committed inside the Catholic Church. Our Lady of Fatima said that many nations would disappear in the chastisement. Dr. Plinio noted something I thought was very interesting to contemplate, that the miracle of the sun of October 1917 that left its orbit and raced toward the earth with those hundreds of thousands of observers who saw that miracle. He said it seems to prefigure a cosmic chastisement where the very equilibrium of the sun may be altered in obedience to a command of Our Lady. What would be the consequence in our solar system if the sun would actually shake and change its course for a short period of time? Such a cosmic disequilibrium could produce all kinds of meteorological catastrophes on the face of the earth, destroying countless things and people. Yet, even after that, many of the people who survived these catastrophes would still need the miracle of a conversion. And for that, we will need a great miracle, that intervention of Our Lady that she spoke about at Quito, an intervention she promised would occur in a marvelous and unexpected way. And so I close, noting that while it seems we have before us very dark and grave panorama, it is also one that includes a great hope. The promise of grandiose miracles necessary to make contemporary man return to the right path and make possible the reign of Mary, as Our Lady promised in Fatima and at Quito. In order to be prepared for such miracles, let us turn to Our Lady of Good Success. Read her prophecies. They shed light on the chaos and confusion of our time, and they give a great hope for the future. Pray to her she will not let you down, as she wants to be known in these times, and thus she gives special graces and assistance to those who turn to her. I will close with some beautiful words of Our Lady to Mother Mariana. Like the star of the tempestuous sea of life, my son and I will illuminate and direct those who have recourse to me under this title to the secure port, delivering them from an eternal shipwreck. In these days when a shipwreck seems so imminent, in the church and in our personal lives, She herself tells us to direct ourselves to her under this title of good success, and she will give us the light to understand and take the correct position, and then lead us to the secure port, which is heaven. Thank you.